Welcome to the Multidose Podcast, your guide to authenticity, hosted by Multazim Zia. Brought to you by the Multipath. This podcast is more than just insights, it's your dose of authenticity. Join us as experts, celebrities, influencers, and real people share their authentic knowledge like never before. From every episode, you can expect to learn something new and maybe explore a new perspective on your own life. To support our podcast, consider donating to our Patreon and share the love on social media. Every like, follow, comment, share, and penny counts. Find us on all streaming platforms and connect with us on our social media at The Multipath and at Multazim Zia. Your authenticity is just one dose away.
So, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Everybody knows you're a formidable force. All the legal geeks will know who you are. And I would start off right from the get-go asking you one of the questions that's been on my mind. And that is, you mentioned on your profiles that it took you 4 attempts to become, before you became the 177th president of the Law Society. What challenges and what setbacks did you face, and how did you overcome them?
I still get emotional hearing about those 4 attempts that it took me. But absolutely, it took me 4 attempts to become president. One of the reasons being is that you need to be voted into the position. You need to be elected into the position. So I was at the, I was reliant on votes to get me in. But I'm a firm believer that nothing comes to you before your time. And, had it come slightly before, I would have been caught up in the COVID-19 pandemic. I was, but to the point that I perhaps wouldn't have got out and made the impact, or start to make the impact that I was able to make as deputy vice president, that then fed into my presidential term. Because vice president, I spent 5 months being vice president, and all of that was in lockdown. And whilst we believe that I am the longest serving president in modern history, some 19 months instead of the usual 12 months, a lot of that was in lockdown. And to ascend into this position of influence and authority, and to hold that position, and to do so from behind a computer screen in your home, when you're meeting government ministers, you're meeting the opposition and other politicians and key stakeholders in the judiciary and so forth, having perhaps never been in the room with those individuals before, was quite a daunting prospect. But, I was thrown in at the deep end, and I could have sunk or swim, and I swam.
Yeah, amazing. So what kept you motivated? I know you mentioned just then that you're a firm believer in you don't get things before your time. But what kept you motivated? Because usually being rejected once or twice is deflating. 4 times, obviously not an insult, but more so it does take a lot out of you to come back and keep trying. What kept you motivated?
What kept me motivated was a steadfast belief that I was going to do this. And also how powerful, how amazing it would be if I achieved it. And not just for me, but for everyone else looking on, who have thought about putting themselves forward for something and thought twice about doing it. And when people say to me, or said to me, I would have taken the hint after the first attempt. And I'm like, hint? What hint? I would have kept going, because the belief inside of me would have kept me going. A 5th, a 6th, 7th, I don't care. I'd have kept going. If nothing else, just to irritate everyone. But it was that steadfast belief that I could do this, and how amazing it would be if I got there. And when I got there, what I was going to do with that position, and that position being president, provides you with a remarkable platform to amplify your voice, to have your voice heard, and to do some amazing work. And that was what drove me. And of course, there were knockbacks. There were times, 3 times where I didn't succeed. But for me, I took the opportunity to learn, to grow, to refine and hone my offering until I was successful on the 4th attempt.
What strategies did you employ to maintain your morale and and go through those challenging times, not just obviously going through these 4 attempts, but as you were the president, what actual implementary strategy could you use or could people use in their everyday life that you used?
Well, absolutely. So I had a vision board. And anybody who's into positive thinking, law of attraction, will know what I'm talking about when I say about a vision board. A vision board, so long before I became deputy vice president. So you're elected as deputy vice president, and then you go on to become vice president and then president. So it's an automatic trajectory, unless, of course, something happens to you along the way that then warrants you not progress into office. But I had a vision board, and I had written on that board long before that I was going to become deputy vice president. So it was that steadfast belief in me, holding on to my faith, my belief. And I absolutely believe that I am exactly where I am meant to be. And it was that belief that drove me, that picked me up. When I fell and I got knocked down, it was that absolute steadfast belief that allowed me to pick myself up, brush myself off, and try and try and try again.
Amazing. So your journey to becoming the first person of color and the sixth female president, as I understand, in my eyes, is quite historic, and I think it is actually historic as well. What do you hope that your current career and your achievements and your accolades do for other aspiring underrepresented groups and minorities? For example, I think minorities like myself. What do you hope that it does?
Well, I hope it does. What I know it's done is that it's opened doors. It's shown us, including myself, that there are doors there that I didn't even know were there. And that was one of the privilege of office, that I would be invited into rooms that I would never have been invited into, and still am being invited into those rooms after almost 2 years after leaving office, and walk through doors that I didn't even know were there. So by being in this space, I did lots of things that perhaps tradition dictated that, one shouldn't do, one shouldn't talk about. But I was determined to talk about that, to showcase this office in a different light, to ensure that people, you can dream, and those dreams do come true. They become reality. And so when we were campaigning as candidates to become deputy vice president, and when asked the question, how are you going to promote equality, diversity, inclusion, as I remember it, it was exactly that. It was about being visible, about being a role model. And not just to, but just to everyone, every young person who's out there dreaming, and not just young people, but everyone who's dreaming, that actually every door is open. If you push, you persevere until something happens. And that's exactly what I did.
On the conversation of EDI, which is equality, diversity, and inclusion, then I recently did an article on underrepresentation, how it's still such a massive gaping hole and something that still needs to be addressed in the legal professions, from solicitors to barristers, so across the whole board. What barriers have you seen in your time as president, even after, and your experience as well, just overall? And what are key ways that we still need to address them? How can we still address them, because they're still present and they're prevalent? What are your ideas around that?
Well, absolutely. So we often talk about barriers that we can see. We don't always talk about the unseen barriers. And in fact, one of the reasons why we don't talk about them is because possibly we don't always know they are there. So some of the issues that I had to navigate my way around is I didn't realize until later in life that actually my low socioeconomic status would perhaps hinder my progress. It wouldn't allow me that social currency that I would need. I didn't have the financial currency at times to progress like I would have liked to. I also didn't always have those networks that I now draw upon. So what I would like to see is that whilst the figures within the legal profession is somewhat reflective of the wider UK population, certainly in the solicitor profession, and of course, when we talk about Silex, our Chartered Institute Legal Executive colleagues, it's very diverse, in terms of certainly the solicitor profession and Silex, women make up the majority in those professions. So if I concentrate on the solicitor profession for the moment, women are about 53% of practicing solicitors. But that figure drops off when you then go into partnership. And we see that whether you are from a disabled background, whether you are from an LGBTQ plus background, whether you are from a ethnic minority background, what we know is the profession is very diverse at the junior end. But as soon as you start to move on up through the senior rungs of the profession, that's where the drop-off comes across the characteristics. And so what we need to do is, and there's been lots of work that's been done on this to try and understand what the drop-off is. We need to ensure a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusion. So if we're going to talk about reasonable adjustments for our colleagues who are disabled, then we need to ensure that those reasonable adjustments are exactly that. If we are going to talk about inclusion, we also have to ensure that it is absolutely inclusive, not an exclusive culture, but one where people feel that they belong, that they can make a real contribution, they can thrive, that where their skills, their attributes, those are the determinants to their success. Nothing else should matter. And until we address that, until we face that head on. So if I give you in terms of the wider UK currently, we're not talking about, when we talk about the riots that are going on, we're not talking about it along racial lines. We're talking about it that it's the far right who's rioting. Not everybody out there is from the far right. But what we don't like to talk about in this society is how racism, and I'm not talking about the racism that perhaps we'd like to import from America. I'm talking about some of that holds us back. And when I read, and the press has to take, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but the press to take the press also has to take responsibility here as well as our politicians and, quite frankly, some of our celebrities who need to stay off of social media. If we can't be kind, if we can't be respectful, if we don't have anything positive or constructive to say, then don't say anything at all. But how many generations does it take for me, for you, for anyone whose parents perhaps or grandparents were not born in this country? How many generations is it going to take for us to be considered British? And I leave that for your listeners to ponder on.
I was going to say that is such a powerful message and point of view. And it's quite similar to what I posted on LinkedIn. I posted quite heavily on these riots. And I will circle back to my original question as well. There are other caveats I want to go over. But I posted some very similar, I think, mirrored messages of what you said on my LinkedIn recently. And I've been posting quite heavily on the topic of the fascists and the right wings and how it became from it's become more from a clear racist element and how media companies have not taken accountability. The wording they're using, the way they've classified it as protests, and not, to be fair, I classed it as terrorism in my definition when you look at it from the CPS websites. When you go through these type of motions, and again, I will circle back to the original question as well in a later part of this, but when you think about these riots, now that we're on the topic of this, and you discuss diversity in terms of colour, gender, disabilities, you mentioned earlier in your response that sometimes people don't know about these issues. A lot of these issues are heavily addressed and they're recognised. Why do you think they're still not implemented, or they've not been digested or absorbed by people, especially larger corporations as well? Because again, the diversity guide, if you look at the pattern of diversity, especially with disabilities and ethnic minorities, yes, it's improving, but it's nowhere near where it should be at the moment. So if people know about it, why are they not actually implementing it? Is it a lack of education? Is it the fact that they need more consultants in there? Is it more input? What's your perspective?
I would suggest it's probably all of that. And I would throw in there's fear as well. We
Hmm.
have got ourselves into a position where we have perhaps, we are scared to have a conversation about needing to have a conversation because we're scared that we might offend, who we might offend, what we might not get correct, what we might not say. We've also divided ourselves up so much. We've divided, that actually, what is the common thing that we are seeking to address? May I suggest that, for lots of us, it's discrimination.
Hmm.
That's the common thing. We also, many of us want, that equality of opportunity. We want to be recognized for the individuals that we are. We want equity. We want fairness, all of those things. But of course, in who shouts the loudest, and in that division, we're not addressing the underlying issues. And going back to the riots, what is not being addressed, if you are throwing all these individuals in jail who individuals are claiming that these are criminals anyway. So how are we solving the problem? How are we addressing the problem? We need to look at the underlying issues that have
Yeah.
driven some of these people out onto the streets in the first place.
Hmm.
I don't condone their behavior, some of them. I don't condone their behavior or the way that they have gone about their business. It has absolutely put fear into. I spoke with my mother the other day. I was away on business, and I spoke to my mother the other day, and to hear the fear in her voice, how dare they? How dare
Mm.
they? When we think about the contributions that my grandparents, my parents, and no doubt yours and others, and those whose parents are how many generations born in this country
Mm.
and so forth, they do not represent those who took to the streets and behaved the way they do not represent the country, this country, that I have grown to know and to love and to want to be a part of. But what we need to do is, and what the politicians cannot escape, if they are very true to what they are saying, then they must address the growing social inequality gap in this country, in health, in housing, in education, all of those things, in who gets ahead, who has equity, and equality of opportunity. We must address that. Or these riots, these protests, whatever we choose to call them, will keep happening because they've been simmering away for a long time
Mm.
under the surface.
Yes, I've been reading a lot of articles about, and I've been going over past articles and past riots. I think 2011 comes to mind if we think about it. Again, you mentioned a few of these issues that politicians and celebrities and media agencies need to address. I was listening to the news the other day, and a conversation that came up was about whether or not social media should start banning or temporarily being closed when riots are going on. I'm interested to hear your opinion on this because I had quite a firm opinion on this, but let me hear your side first, and then I'll see if we agree. But one side obviously was arguing, yes, temporarily, whilst people are planning things like this on social media, it should temporarily be closed. On the other hand, people were saying it's freedom of speech. How dare you try to close social media? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so I've heard all of that. So I put a
Mhm.
statement out earlier this week, and that's exactly what I called for. I called for social media to be temporarily suspended. Now, I think it's fair to say that that statement has received great traction on social media. I think it's fair to say that through the medium of social media, I was able to reach that many people, and it's still got traction. It's still going. I think the algorithms perhaps are a bit confused, but the
Yeah.
point is that we have the Online Safety Act, and some people are confused whether we have it or whether we don't. The Mayor of London has come out and said it's not fit for purpose, it's got no teeth. Well, lots of us have been saying that for a long time. And the politicians knew that perhaps when they voted on it, for it to become into legislation, that it didn't go far enough. Social media, for some reason, those individuals who hide behind their keyboards in the comfort of their home, who suddenly become emboldened. And of course, we now have heard of individuals being arrested for things that they have put that may or may not have incited these individuals in the first place. I absolutely called for a temporary suspension of social media. There is one individual who I can think of in particular who owns a particular platform. Shut him down. It's, shut him down. But what was interesting in my call for temporary suspension of social media was individuals who said lots of those things that you said. There were people who said, well, how else am I going to converse with my family? Well, pick up the phone or text them. But some of the things that people were putting on there. So I think the difficulty is we have become absolutely reliant on social media. Even if this wasn't happening, I've long expressed concern as to the impact of social media on our lives. How many times are you walking behind someone in the street where, and even people on their bikes, they're on their bike and they've got their mobile phone texting or making a telephone call. We can't seem to put those things down, and we have lost the ability to have a conversation with each other. It's impacted not only our social values, it's impacted our manners. So I'm not a prolific poster on social media. I don't need to know what you're having for dinner, and various other things. I think there is a discourse. Social media has driven a discourse through our society. And where you have politicians, and one politician who comes to mind across the pond, who absolutely took this social media to another level, and a number of individuals who've jumped on the bandwagon who think it is okay to express yourself in that way with no comeback. And quite frankly, the government should have acted and should have temporarily suspended social media, because then we'd have to talk to each other, wouldn't we?
Yep. I'm glad you said that, because I was in unity with your response. I was thinking the exact same thing. I thought, to be fair, it makes sense. Social media is not the only form of communication. It's not. You can agree or disagree with my point on this, but for me, when the person was arguing against the temporary close of social media because it was prohibiting freedom of speech, it's not prohibiting freedom of speech. It's prohibiting that medium. It's not banning
you can still
from
talk.
Exactly. It's not a legislation or statute that's preventing you or saying you have to say a certain way, or you can't say certain things. It's just a medium that is blocking, the channel that's blocking. So I was in absolute agreement. I read obviously a post that was pro and well for it and against it. On the conversation of communication, and you've come on to a very, very important point for me, especially for my generation and generations younger and older, actually. You mentioned that everybody's stuck to their phones, and the lack of communication face to face has obviously hindered people's communication and interviewing skills and conversation skills. What type of negotiation techniques and what kind of conversation techniques can you think of that should be more proactively used in terms of just generally day-to-day basis, not in key meetings, just general day-to-day things that have been lost because of social media and because people keep texting and posting things?
I think what's been lost is our ability to listen, actively listen, to process information in real time. With texting and so forth. I mean, sometimes I get some messages and I need a translator. I don't know, all these, we've lost the ability to spell, and grammar and so forth. I don't understand what some people, when they message me, what they're talking about. So all of those things, but I think also I prefer, and I know we're doing this remotely, but I absolutely prefer being in person. There are cues that we give each other, either body language or eye contact, or just listening, because we can show when we're listening. When someone's listening and when somebody's, fallen asleep. And I think whilst we went through a terrible period with the pandemic. And we did what we had to do in order to save lives and save ourselves. But it's changed society. It's changed us. And I think we need to return back to self, and being in person, and just the way we interact with each other. We just absolutely need to remember that we are humans. When I talk to you, when I talk to anybody else, I'm talking to a human. And I think lots of that has been lost. And some of that is driving people's anxiety, impacting people's mental health. And we've just lost the ability to communicate with people empathetically.
Okay. And do you know, if you start translating that into the legal profession, so bringing it back to what both of us kind of know, you more so than I will. But in the legal profession, I've noticed this when I've spoken to students or even law students. A lot of the times when I've spoken to people and that are not from a legal background, they automatically assume people in the legal professions will be better communicators, better advocates, and will not really suffer any sort of anxiety or stress because it's their job entails them to go through this anyway. In your experience, how often or how well is the mental health world being spoken, or mental health issues being spoken about, anxiety, for example, or depression or burnout? I know it's on a rise because I've seen it all over my social media and I speak about it proactively as well. But in your experience, which is vast and it's got a wide range of different areas, how common is it for you to see it, hear it, and actually think it's progressing in the right direction?
So a couple of things. When I was president, I had three presidential charities. One of them was Law Care, the mental health and well-being charity that looks after the legal profession. And I think it's fair to say that Law Care's work has grown exponentially. So the other thing, of course, is alcohol. The way or the legal some of us and our relationship with alcohol, that is the consumption of alcohol has grown as well. So there are a couple things going on. There are some of us who haven't been in the office, on a regular basis for a long time. And for various reasons, we moved further afield during lockdown, because, we thought perhaps we'd never go back into the office. I myself, as I alluded to earlier, I prefer being around people. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. I worry about people who do not feel the need to leave their home to come into the office to interact. I worry for the younger generation as to how they're going to learn. I remember when I was training, I couldn't have done it remotely. It was difficult for me as president doing the job remotely. So, let alone trying to come into the profession and learn what you have to learn and not have the benefit of being able to say to someone, you've got to book a meeting with someone if you're working remotely, and not have the benefit of being able to have that conversation with someone. You have a brainwave and just be saying, can I bounce this off of you or something? Can I have a quick word, rather than sending somebody a meeting link and saying, I would like to book in a few moments with you. It's just not conducive as to, I know people do it, but it's not what I prefer. So there are lots of issues that's going on. The profession is a very high pressured profession. We are in testing times. Riots aside, protests aside, the legal profession is evolving very quickly when we look at technology. It's at times the market has contracted. Some of us are worried about workflow, the impact of technology on our lives, on jobs, and so forth, and what that might mean in the long run. So there's lots for us to take in. But what I would say to any individual who is struggling, there is help out there, whether it's Law Care, whether it's the Solicitors Benevolent Fund, Samaritans, all of those. There are lots of other organizations and charities that does formidable work, and various hotlines that individuals can call and speak to. There is a recognition in the legal profession that we are addressing issues more and more. Some of the things that we would never talk about before, we are starting to address. The profession has been seen for far too long as being conservative, but hopefully we will continue to shake off some of those old names that others have attached to us as we modernize and move forward and become fit for the 21st century.
Amazing. I was actually reading something today. Someone put up a solicitor, a well-known solicitor, put up a post about how they suffer through depression. And I actually commented on that post because it made me recall a conversation I had with somebody when I was starting to transition into the law profession. And they said, always hide any mental health issues because it'll be frowned upon, especially in the legal profession. And when I read that post, it just reminded me of that conversation. And since then, I've obviously spoken to hundreds of solicitors, barristers, legal professionals, and everyone has advised against that. So it's quite nice seeing someone of your caliber also advocating for things going in the right way and looking for that support. I'm going to divert and digress off topic a little bit because you mentioned AI, and I'm not sure if AI is your area of expertise, but again, your input is going to be valuable for the audience. So with AI, what is your view or your opinion on AI being used in synergy with barristers, legal professionals? And this is more so when it's being used in case preparation or legislation reviews or uh, note taking or note writing. What's your view on AI being used as the software, as a tool in synergy?
Well, it's interesting in terms of note taking. So, governance is also my background. And of course, people have used some form of technology for a long time in minute taking, note taking, whatever. I was being interviewed the other day, and literally, whilst I was speaking, this technology was transcribing it into written record. I often think about grammar. You write a piece of an article or so forth. We have long had spell check, grammar check. AI is perhaps some will view it as an extension of that, that it's leveled the playing field in some respects for those who perhaps were not particularly articulate in writing. And suddenly, all of a sudden, AI changes that. There are law firms out there who encourage the use of AI in writing applications. And of course, we know that there are a lot more lawyers out there using AI. They may be restricted as to what they're using it for, but what's interesting is the number of law firms who don't actually have an AI policy in place. So how staff use it, when they should deploy it, and so forth. It is a fact, and I've spoken and written lots about artificial intelligence. I've stopped doing it of late because I think some of my concerns that I initially had around discrimination and bias and so forth, as more people have taken up the mantle, that we are conscious of it and hopefully it will be addressed. But what we also need to recognize is that the technology, the lots of law firms, whether it's Harvey or some others, that other law firms, within their laboratories are working on, has become a feature of lots of legal professionals' lives. Some judges have advocated using it to write their judgments. So it's out there, it's being used, but I think and I hope that what we have been promised in terms of regulation will materialize under this current government. But that's not to say that we need the government to do so, because we have, as legal professionals, we have our own regulators who, quite frankly, need to get on and regulate, provide some guidance, some comprehensive guidance in this space.
Amazing. I was quite interested that you said that because I thought you might have a very different outlook on AI and its use. So, in terms of being more, I guess, frank about it, as it currently stands, and as you mentioned, a lot of law firms don't even have the governance or the policies around AI. As it stands, what do you think AI would be acceptable in terms of use? in a law firm or by a lawyer or a solicitor or a barrister, what uses do you think it can 100% be used in, or where you think actually this is a great area, let's wait till legislation, or let's wait till some sort of policy is being deployed by some sort of governing body or regulators?
Well, absolutely. And let me be clear. Of course, the legal profession is not the only profession or
Yes.
sector that is deploying AI. But I think what I certainly wouldn't want AI to be used for, and what we have known it has been used for, is to make decisions about me, because the technology is only as good as the data that's been input into that by the individuals who's putting the data in. And if those individuals are replicating their own biases, conscious or unconsciously, then my worry is that that will not be what the technology spits out at the other end will inherently include those biases. So, for instance, somebody said to me yesterday that they had heard, and I don't know, I haven't done any work on this, but that they had heard that some of the rioters, protesters were being identified, even though they had face coverings, that the technology was able to see right through that face covering. So we had an interesting conversation around that, a logical conversation around that, and comparisons compared to the technology that's deployed at the airport when you go through and so forth, and what perhaps that can see, as opposed to whether I've got lipstick on or not behind a mask, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I think there is a fear amongst many because it's unknown. I do think we absolutely need to keep a rein on this technology, because we don't know what we don't know, because we're not being told lots as to some of the organizations that are developing this technology. I worry that it may, when we talk about facial recognition and the way that the government collects that data as well. So for example, I obviously have a passport, and I had applied for my passport, a while back, and then I had to renew my driver's license. And I tick this box, yes, this is my address, yes, yes, yes. And I thought, after I submitted it, and it said your driving license will be with you within 5 working days, whatever it was, I thought, hold on a moment, I don't recall being asked for a photo. So then when the driving license came through, it had the same photo as the passport. But I don't recall the government ever asking me for my permission to use the information that they had gleaned when I submitted my passport to transpose that for my driving license or anything else. And so it's that transparency that we absolutely have to ensure is there. We have to ensure that individuals understand when this technology is being deployed, and that's the difficulty at the moment. Lots of us have seen lots of videos and so forth. I worry that somebody, when they're putting up, not that I have been anywhere near these protests or whatever, but how do you, when this technology is being deployed and people, and I would hope that there is the technology to be able to discern whether this is a fake or a deep fake or not, whatever. But one does worry, because we've heard celebrities talking about their voices being, and their images being hijacked in this way. And of course, we're in this frenzy at the moment where we're not stopping to ask people. We just point a finger and say, you're guilty.
Yeah.
So that's my concern, as well as that discourse that we have seen played out, and something I had spoken about, myself and many others had spoken about that discourse. And unfortunately, we have seen this in the last few days.
Yes, it is very scary, because I was on Instagram today and I saw a post saying it was one of those questions of figure out which one is the AI version or made image and which one is not. And it turns out every single one was AI, and it was the most powerful images ever. You could never ever differentiate whether it was real or not. Not in a million years. I do a lot of photo editing. I do a lot of work on social media, and I set up my own media company, a photography company, and even I could not ascertain what was real, what was not, what was made up, what sections were photoshopped or faked or AI modulated. It was insane, absolute insanity, which then made me fear for my entire life because all my profiles were open. So yeah, again, I
Absolutely. I
saved
mean, how do you
well,
know? Well, absolutely. How do you know that you're talking to I, Stephanie Boyce now?
yes, exactly. You could be AI generated. I
I
am
could
going
be
to
absolutely.
I'm going to refer back slightly to a conversation just in the middle that we had about remote working and remote conversations. Now, I'm actually a big fan of remote working. I think it's amazing. It's made my life a lot easier, and I actually promote it quite a lot in the sense that it saves me and people like yourself who barely have a space to breathe in their diaries. It gives us all time to have meetings and speak to people, connect in a certain way. But I also appreciate the counter effects of this, i.e., communication, body language, reading, especially for those people who don't proactively piss those. In terms of this being used, and I don't know if this is more of a recent phenomenon. I've only seen and heard about this more recently, especially after COVID, where hearings virtually have become virtual hearings. A lot of hearings have become remote hearings with judges. One of my major concerns is sometimes people are not asked to put their cameras on. Sometimes people are not asked to, people are just asked to have their representatives there and they can sit in the background without the cameras. How do you feel about this being used in that kind of setting, regardless if it's classed as a big case or not? How do you feel about this being used in hearings?
I think there's a time and place for it, everything.
Mm,
But I think where you have a hearing and you are, say, like at a final hearing or so forth, I think certainly if my liberty was at risk or my reputation, I was being sued, civilly, whatever, I would want to be in the room with those characters. I would want to
mm,
look people in the eye. I would want to see their body language if I was the judge, all of those things. There is, and we know it's possible to do some of this remotely, but we also know that during lockdown, there were instances where individuals were I think there was a case, I'm trying to remember, there was a case where an individual witness, and it was quite clearly, somebody pretended to be someone when that was not the person. They're given testimony, they've
oh,
said, this is my name, they've sworn in and whatever. So it is subject to abuse. But equally, we heard from, say, criminal defense practitioners who were having to travel all around the country for little pay, low pay, whereas a remote hearing afforded them the opportunity to stay locally in their home or so forth and do lots of hearings.
mm,
We know in terms of trying to get prisoners, if it's just like a uh, initial hearing,
mm,
then okay, we see the benefits of that. But my personal preference is, as I say, if my liberty was at risk or, I was subject to a claim, I would want to be in the room with all of those individuals so I could see them and face them face to face. But I recognize that there are times and instances where that might not be possible or preferable.
amazing. I do want to ask you a question before we move on to those 5 questions that everybody loves and hates. Um,
Yeah.
And it's more so, again, based on your experience. And obviously, I did read somewhere that you were admitted as a solicitor in 2002, weren't you, as well? But whilst we speak about judges and cases, let's relate that back to the equality, diversity, and inclusion. I think I was reading somewhere where there were studies, I don't know if it was in the UK or abroad in America, where it was seen that people from ethnic backgrounds were less favored in their results that they were receiving compared to others. Now, I can't recall the actual study itself, but it was an article and a study that I was reading. Do you think that translates into the UK system as well? Do you think that the equality, diversity, and inclusion kind of criteria, especially in terms of skin color, religions, do you think that's something that evidently or subconsciously happens in the UK?
What we do know is currently with the solicitor's qualifying examination that actually non-white students are not performing as well as their white counterparts. My understanding is that the Solicitors Regulation Authority has commissioned work to look into that,
Mhm.
and rightly so. Because if there are disparities in the way, whether that's the way that the exams are constructed or whether whatever may be going on, then we absolutely need to get to the bottom of it, because what we need is an equal playing field, a level playing field. But of course, I have spoken about the inequality in education. If you come from a low socioeconomic background, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, your race, ethnicity, so forth. But primarily, if you come from a low socioeconomic background, you may not have access to a good quality education. And as I've long spoken about, equally housing, healthcare, and so forth. And as I've long spoken about, we have to ensure that that gap, which we have seen getting wider, is actually getting narrower. We need our citizens of this country to aspire to be all they can be, that they have the resources and the tools available to them to achieve and put their best self forward. And if there are policies and processes that are not enabling that, then absolutely we must be committed to ensuring that we leave no stone unturned until we discover those reasons why.
Very interesting. I do want to bounce back off that one more time. You've mentioned throughout this kind of podcast that there has to be some policies, and the politicians have to take some sort of accountability and actually be more proactive in their approach of what they're introducing, what legislations they're passing. What key legislations or statutes do you think that are yet to be that you absolutely think will make a crucial change?
I was just about to say, gosh, we'd be here all day. There is, it's policies. There is legislation in place that enables so much of what we've spoken about, but it's the way that those policies are being carried out or not, as the case might be. It's also about awareness, a lack of awareness and education that individuals know when to tap into those resources. So, for instance, if we go back to the law, I believe that the law should be taught in all schools, because legal rights mean absolutely nothing if you don't know what your rights are, and you don't even know when those rights are being taken away. And far too often in this country, individuals, if they are facing eviction, if they are going through divorce or issues with their children or so forth, they don't know when to access that legal help or where to go to. And what we see is a snowball effect, that individuals, when it's too late, they're on the streets, or their children has been expelled from school, whatever, that actually that's when they turn to the law. And not always, because individuals don't know that it might be a legal issue. So we need to equip our citizens with the resources and tools to help themselves to identify when they should seek help. As I say, the policies that are in place, we have a healthcare system, the NHS, that receives an enormous amount of money, but yet, and let's see what this government will do, we know that it's not efficient. We also know that the criminal justice system favours particular demographics or characteristics over others, that disproportionately, if you happen to be of a particular demographic, you are more likely to go to jail. We need to address that issue, whether it's issues of policies or deployment, whatever's going on. We need to ensure that in this country that there is that level playing field that I spoke about in terms of access to good quality education. We have a multi-tier system here where at the moment I hear and still hear stories about individuals in schools, whether it's school dinners, poor school dinners. We shut the kitchens down in schools. Did it not occur to us that if we shut it, when I went to school, I loved my school dinners. They were hot dinners. They were proper dinners. There was a recognition that not everyone has the resources at home to be able to have a proper meal. If our bellies are not full, our minds are not concentrated enough to be open to learning. So what did they think was going to happen when they started to shut the kitchens down in schools? And quite frankly, what we have now is not, as I understand it, from some reliable sources, it's not terribly nutritional. We need to address the issue with our housing. We have housing stock, and that is bring back those housing stock that's not in use. Bring them back rather than keep building and keep building. There are people who are living in unsafe, unsecure, uninhabitable properties in this country. We should not have people living in accommodation that's got mold and dripping off the walls and so forth. So councils who and housing associations who are responsible for this housing stock need to be held to account. There was supposed to be an independent commission that was supposed to be looking at this a couple of years ago. I haven't heard anything further as to what's happened. But so we've got the policies, we've got the processes in place, but it's whether or not people are deploying them correctly.
Yeah.
We need to be more efficient and effective. So yes, so that's my rant.
I was going to say everything you said, and I think you hit the nail on the head here with the fact that I think one key part of this is the education behind it all. People don't know what to look for, when they should look for it, how to look for it. I concur. Like I said, I just completed my law masters. Even then, through personal, battles and challenges, my sister's divorce issues, I didn't know where to go or who to turn to and how to do it. And I was doing a law masters, so obviously that's not the golden standard. It's more so if I'm going through a whole master's and I'm struggling to find the direction of who I need to speak to, how to do it. You can only imagine what people are going through when they're distressed and they don't have the support, or they don't have the education to show where or signpost them. Something as a physiotherapist, which is my background, that we were taught from the very beginning is if you can't treat something, don't just tell somebody you can't treat it. Tell them where to go. Signpost them.
Yeah,
Always
signpost
signpost somebody.
yeah.
So if it's not your problem, don't just push them away, which is what I've found with a lot of solicitor firms. It's not our problem. We can't deal with it. Sorry, it's too far gone. We'll see you later. Signpost somebody. Say, look, you need to go be looking at this charity, or you need to look at this solicitor firm. It's so important, and obviously all these key issues that you mentioned as well: housing disrepairs, the food, the educational systems, food supplies. All these key points need to be addressed, and I think one of the biggest issues, and ironically for education systems, is the education behind it. So
the stage is set, the spotlight is on. This is Doses of Authenticity, where the real stories unfold, every answer reveals a new layer, and the true self shines. Let the questioning begin.
What is your number one life philosophy?
That every door is open. If you push, you persevere until something happens. You keep going.
How do you want to be remembered?
I remember my older brother saying to me, he said, sis, he said, they're going to be talking about you in years to come, even when you're gone, 100 years from now. So how do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered for somebody who made a positive difference.
One change you would make to society?
I have a favorite quote, and it's not mine. I can't claim it, but I don't know whose it is. But in a world where we can be anything, be kind.
The best advice you have ever been given?
And I was told by a fellow solicitor to network. I am in no doubt that I am where I am today because of those in my network, known and unknown, who've advocated for me, spoke up for me, and spoken my name in rooms that I'm not even in.
What makes you authentic and unique?
My passion and purpose. Find your purpose. And when you find your purpose, carry it out with passion.
Before we go, tell people where they can find you, where they can learn more about you, and any final closing remarks.
Wow. So people can find me on my website, which is www.istephaниeboyce.com, and on that website it will have more information about me, including my various social media platforms. One bit of advice I would leave you with, I guess the point is that throughout my life, resilience, determination, and an inability to take advice has steered me well. So believe in yourself, believe in your dreams and follow your dreams, because if you don't birth your dream, somebody else is going to do it for you.